Welcome to California Now, a podcast produced by Visit California. I'm Soterios Johnson. Today, we're talking with Jeff Gordinier, the food and drinks editor at Esquire magazine. He'll share highlights from a series of California culinary road trips he curated with an all-star team of chefs and critics.
That Julia Child thought this taco stand was one of the greatest restaurants in America tells you something, okay? Because when we envision Julia Child, we don't necessarily envision her at a taco stand on Milpas Street in Santa Barbara.
We'll also leave the mainland behind and explore the beautiful island of Catalina.
We've always been known as a party island. Of course, there's plenty of drinks to be had, but really we are surrounded by the most idyllic clear waters, and so there are many opportunities to go snorkeling and diving, and we have glass-bottom boats.
It's all coming up on California Now. Longtime listeners of this podcast and fans of food writing in general will no doubt recognize the name of my next guest. Jeff Gordinier is Esquire magazine's food and drinks editor and the author of the new book, Hungry, Eating, Road Tripping, and Risking It All with the Greatest Chef in the World. He's joining us today to talk about his book as well as a culinary road trip feature he wrote for the 2020 California Visitor's Guide. Welcome back to California Now, Jeff.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So your book, Hungry, sounds like a wild adventure across multiple continents. Can you give us a little overview of what the book is about?
Yes, the book takes us to Mexico, to Denmark, to Norway, to Australia, with a man who's considered the greatest chef in the world. I understand that nomenclature may be open to debate, but the person in question here, Rene Redzepi, is definitely the most influential chef in the world over the last decade. He's a guy who owns and runs a restaurant in Copenhagen, Denmark called Noma. People who are super serious foodies tend to know all about Noma and tend to follow it on Instagram. They're obsessed with every step that Rene Redzepi takes, every move he makes. And so the book is about how, about 5 years ago, kind of in a fluky way, this guy, Rene Redzepi, reached out to me. He emailed me pretty much through his publisher and asked to meet for coffee. And that led, weirdly, to 4 years of traveling around the world together.
That is amazing. I can only imagine when you got that email or that phone call, what you must have felt. Like, why is he writing to me?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was writing for the New York Times about food at that time, so I figured he wanted to promote his new books. He had a new cookbook out. But the weird thing is very quickly the conversation turned to something bigger than that. You know, he didn't really talk that much about his cookbooks. He wanted to talk about us going to Mexico together. And he's very charismatic. He's the kind of person who looks you right in the eye and is very transfixing and sort of cool and mesmerizing. He's like, you and I should go to Mexico and eat tacos. And I was like, what's happening here? What do you mean? Like, why would we do that? You know? But
yeah,
it sounded pretty fun. So I said yes. And we ended up, I did an article about it for the New York Times. I figured it was over then, but then it led to more trips. And it kind of went on to the point where I realized that I had a book.
Right.
You know? So the book is about our travels together, but it's really kind of a study of creativity and risk and reinvention, that point in your life when you decide to change things up, which I was doing and which Rene was doing as well. And kind of it's just about the art of the road trip, you know, in that way it dovetails very well with, you know, the look we're taking at California here, because there's probably no phrase in the English language that's more of an incantation for me than road trip. You know, like if someone says, let's go out or let's go on a vacation, I'm sort of nonplussed. But if someone says, let's go road tripping, I'll do anything. Like I'll get on a plane, a train, let's rent a car, let's just go. And I find that incredibly appealing. I like the idea that you can change your surroundings just from saying yes.
Right. I mean, and we love road trips on the podcast, and to focus the road trip around food. I mean, I almost feel like there's almost no better reason to take a road trip than to just like experience the amazing food offerings in an area.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. I don't really understand what the road trip amounts to without the meals, you know? Like, I mean, to me, the road trip is all about the music you play in the car and the food you eat along the way.
So let's shift our focus to California now.
You bet.
I mentioned in the intro that you crafted 3 culinary road trips for the new California Visitor's Guide. You reached out to a bunch of your friends and contacts in the industry, people like Ruth Reichel, Dominique Crenn, Steven Satterfield, and a whole bunch of others, and you kind of like crowdsourced some of the most delicious stops in the Golden State. I can't imagine a funner assignment.
Yeah, it really was illuminating. It was fun because, like as you point out, I mean, many of these people, Nikki Nakayama from En Naka restaurant in Los Angeles, Ruth Reichel, Claudette Zepeda from the San Diego area. I mean, they know food, right? I mean, these Khushbu Shah, who's from Food and Wine magazine, these are people who really, really know food, and they really, really know what's going down in California. So it was an honor. I mean, I'm a California boy myself. I grew up in the Pasadena area. So it was also a privilege for me to be able to celebrate the state because I love the state so much. And you sort of have these expert guides along the way on each road trip so that you don't make any mistakes, because there's nothing worse than a wasted meal. You know, like you don't want to be
Right.
on the road in California and go to a bad place. And you will not go to a bad place if you follow
Right.
this list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not going to miss any opportunities. Absolutely.
No, you're going to feel like you did it right, which is what we want you to feel. And as a Californian myself, you know, when people tell me, I went to LA, but I ate here instead of the place you recommended, I got to tell you, man, it breaks my heart. You know, I'm like,
Right.
really? No, I gave you 5 taquerias to go to. Why'd you go to the lame one? You know,
Right.
you know, we're here to help.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with the first road trip you created, the one that starts in San Diego and moves north to Orange County and then curls kind of eastward toward the desert. Tell us about some of the best bites along that route.
Well, I love that route. You know, the places in California that probably automatically get the most tourist love are going to be Los Angeles and San Francisco. But as we Californians know, there's a lot of beautiful stuff happening south of Los Angeles. I've spent a lot of time in Laguna Beach. My parents now live in Laguna Beach, and I'm there pretty much all August every year. So I'm a big fan of The Stand. Now, that may seem like a weird one to mention first here, but it's a vegan restaurant that's it's been there like since the early 70s. It's been vegan way before vegan was cool. And it's kind of like going back in time. There's a lot of stuff like this in Laguna Beach. There's a great old record store, too, called Sound Spectrum that I think's been open since the mid-'60s. So you can go to Sound Spectrum for some vinyl, and you head over to the stand. You could walk over there, get an avocado sandwich with some sprouts. It seems like to me a quintessential Californian experience to get like one hippie vegetarian meal, you know?
Yeah. And well, what makes their vegan meal stand out amongst other vegan restaurants?
The freshness. I mean, that's true of all sorts of restaurants in California, as we know, the freshness of the produce. And, you know, like they're not using avocados that are not ripe. They also make all these soups, and soups have incredible depth of flavor in spite of the fact that there's no dairy, there's no butter, etc. You know, you just feel good after eating there. I mean, another place I noticed along the way this year, that's a new place, is called Jeune et Jolie. That's in Carlsbad, California, close to Camp Pendleton. So it's only a couple exits south of Camp Pendleton. And you go toward the water, and suddenly you find this incredibly cool, sexy space. There's a chef there named Andrew Bachelet who's making Michelin star quality French food. I mean, he could be cooking at a Thomas Keller restaurant. It's that good. And
Wow.
plus the room, yeah, it's that good. And it's just like the room is amazing. They have this really cool French art on the walls. They have a really young clientele. There's a lot of energy in the room. And all the music is played on old reel-to-reels. So they have these giant reel-to-reel machines, and they're playing like all these French songbirds, like, sort of the classics of the French songbook from this. It's just like, how did I find this? Like, if you're doing a road trip in that part of California and you walk into Junes Joly, you will write me a thank you note. Like, you will be so happy that you found it.
I've also heard there are some nice spots, like in San Juan Capistrano and that area as well. Any recommendations?
Yes, my family has a deep passion for El Maguey, which is a family-owned Mexican restaurant near the train station in San Juan Capistrano. Now, a road trip, if you ask me, doesn't always have to be in a car. So if you decide you want to do it in a train, that's fine too. A lot of people love to take the train from San Juan Capistrano up to Union Station in Los Angeles. It's a beautiful trip. And in fact, my wife does that when she's out with me. She likes to go up to her office that way. El Maguey is right there by the train station, so you can get some chicken mole. I judge a lot of places, Mexican places, based on the sort of integrity of their mole sauces. In fact, mole plays a big part in Hungry, my book, because for much of the book, Chef Rene Redzepi is on this quest through Mexico to figure out mole, to sort of figure out what makes it work. A lot of Americans are only familiar with mole poblano, which is the sort of rust brown mole that has chocolate and peanuts in it. But in fact, there are many, many moles. It's really an infinitude of moles in Mexico. So El Maguey is a restaurant where you're gonna be able to dive into that. Like, it's not just a combination plate kind of place, where you get, an enchilada, a taco, rice and beans, whatever. It's beyond that. They have that too, and they do a really good job with it, but they have a lot of the authentic stuff that you might not be able to find along the road.
Right. All right, so let's move up now to the Los Angeles area. Say we hopped the train or we took our car up there, and you grew up in the LA area. So let's talk about some of your favorite places there, and then work our way up the Central Coast.
It is impossible for me not to sing the praises of Pie and Burger. Southern California is a taco paradise. It is taco utopia, but it's also a burger utopia. The cheeseburger. McDonald's was essentially invented in Southern California, right? So, I mean, the burger is very important to us. And my wife is from the West Side, so she goes to the Apple Pan. And her family has very deep ties to the Apple Pan, and I respect that. But I'm an East Sider, and for me, it's all about Pie and Burger, okay? It's a classic, like, 1950s little burger place where they put Thousand Island on the burgers. They have this great, like, kind of a wave of leafy lettuce they put on the burger. It's wrapped in paper. It's the kind of thing when you squeeze it in the paper, all the juices of the burger start running into the bun, and you can't wait to take a bite. I feel at home there.
Oh yeah.
But I'm gonna give your audience a secret.
Okay.
It's obviously tempting to go to Pie and Burger for lunch, for a burger and a slice of pie, of course. But the real secret, the real locals, what they do is go there for breakfast, okay?
Oh.
And you can get a seat easily. They make their own hash browns from scratch, okay? Crunchy on the outside, fluffy inside. They make their own white bread that they toast for the toast. They butter it. So you're getting everything like really handmade for breakfast. But it is the quintessential California breakfast.
Wow, it sounds really amazing. Sounds delicious. And, things don't have to be fancy to be amazing, right?
No, of course they don't. I mean, to keep on with the burger thread here, I'm showing my hand a little bit, but another place farther up the road, it's very meaningful to me, is Paradise Cafe in Santa Barbara, California. I've spent a lot of time in Santa Barbara too. It's basically the most beautiful place in America. And I'm incredibly envious of the people who live there. My wife and I actually love Santa Barbara so much that even though we live in New York, when we decided to get married a couple of years ago, we flew back to Santa Barbara and got married at the courthouse there. And
amazing.
Yeah, and where we went for our dinner on our wedding night was Paradise Cafe to get cheeseburgers and martinis. That was our wedding night dinner.
That sounds
I love
so great.
it that much. But I mean, it's just another place that has the quintessential California cheeseburger. It's a little different in style than the Pie and Burger one. It's a little thicker patty. little more minimalist. Like, I don't think they have all the vegetables on there. But you feel like you walked into an Eagles song at this place. Sun is streaming through the windows. There's an outdoor patio. You just don't want to leave, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So if you're in Santa Barbara, you have to go to La Superica. This is an order. I'm not requesting that you do this, like you have to do this. It's kind of an American rite of passage for people who love food.
Isn't that Julia Child's favorite restaurant?
There you go. A lot of people, you know, who moved the needle in the American food movement, you know, Jonathan Gold, Alice Waters, etc. You know, they come from California.
Right.
That Julia Child thought this taco stand was one of the greatest restaurants in America tells you something, okay? Like, because when we envision Julia Child, we don't necessarily envision her at a taco stand on Milpas Street in Santa Barbara.
I love the thought of that, just that image of her walking up to the taco stand and enjoying one, you know, at a table outside.
Yeah, I mean, and you have to wait in line. I mean, everyone waits in line. There's no special treatment at this place, and it's all cash. You have to bring cash, if I remember correctly. I'm pretty sure that's true. And, you know, it's very, very kind of basic food. I mean, some things are just like tortilla and melted cheese, or tortilla and melted cheese and chiles, or tortilla and some roasted pork. And that's it. You put some salsa on it, you're good to go. You know, I used to work in Santa Barbara. I mean, I remember waiting in line there and seeing David Crosby, Jackson Brown. You know, they're just waiting in line with everybody because they love these tacos so much. I'm going to give your listeners a secret, though, similar to the pie and burger one.
Okay.
At pie and burger, I'm saying go for breakfast.
Right.
At La Superica, you know, you're going to see this big board with all these tacos. And, yeah, you want to get some. But there's a little board right above the window that has specials. And those specials tend to be tamales and sometimes like a stew, you know, like a hominy stew or something. Get that stuff. That stuff is very special. Again, the locals know this. The locals will go in, see whatever is on the board of specials and order 2 of each. I'll tell you, last time I was there, I flew in to Burbank, which is my little secret maneuver. I like to fly to Burbank or Long Beach. And I rented a car and drove straight up to La Superica in Santa Barbara from the airport.
That's amazing. And as you all know, the third road trip you crafted covers San Francisco, the East Bay, wine country, even Sacramento. Let's talk a little bit about some of your favorite places in the Bay Area.
Now, the Bay Area, I will admit, is somewhat foreign territory for me, Southern California. And I think a lot of the tips we have from people like Steven Satterfield and Ruth Reichel are really helpful there. But I love it. I love being in the Bay Area. The Bay Area to me is almost like several states in and of itself because, you know, the Silicon Valley area is different than Berkeley, is different than San Francisco, is different than Marin County. They're all so different. I'm a huge fan of Gordinier, which is on our list, and that is a wine bar and a wine store in Oakland, California. You're probably hearing a bit of a theme, which is that I like places where you can just linger, right? You can just spend the whole day there. You don't have to leave if you don't want to.
Right.
And I did go to Gordinier once for Esquire, and I think I just kind of told my editors, you know, I was in a meeting or something. Like I ended up staying there for like 5 hours. You walk in, it's got this big, high ceilings, cool staff. You can order some cheese and charcuterie, and they specialize in natural wines. Natural wines are having a moment in the culture. These are wines that have no, ideally, theoretically, no sulfites, no intervention from chemicals or anything like that. That's the specialty of Gordinier. So the team there is very helpful. You say you want to explore, you know, a red, a white, and an orange wine or something. They'll give you a flight, give you some things to nibble on, and there's books. There's books in between the bottles. So as you walk through the store, you're seeing, you know, classic works of American literature and poetry just wedged in between the bottles. And you're welcome to grab a book of poems or something and just sit there all day.
Sounds
to me,
amazing.
that's just, let's go.
Spend the whole afternoon or a whole evening. Exactly. Just read poetry, drink wine, have some nibbles, and just chill out.
Yeah, that's a road trip where like maybe just park the car and stay there and leave the next morning.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Just to be safe. That's great. So, let's head over to wine country. What's another place, say, north of the Bay Area that you think is a must see, a must try?
I'm a big fan of the Charter Oak. This is a restaurant in Napa Valley in St. Helena. The chef who kind of oversees the Charter Oak is Christopher Costow, who most people know from the Meadowood, the restaurant at the Meadowood. Now, that's like a, high-level Michelin-starred tasting menu kind of place, somewhat inaccessible to some people because of price. I mean, I would encourage you to try the Meadowood if you can, but if you're just kind of driving through town and you want to see what Costow and his crew are up to, what they're about, the Charter Oak is kind of perfect. It's this giant room, I mean like huge high ceilings. It's almost like you walked into some villa in Tuscany. And they have this big roaring fire at the end, and the chefs are just like hanging things above the fire and throwing things on the grill. They're grilling meats, but they're also grilling vegetables, avocados. There's this sense of vibrancy from the fire and the light streaming in through the windows, and it's like this big, beautiful room. You really feel like you're in Italy or Spain or something like that. And of course, it being wine country, they have an incredible wine list, an incredible wine service. I'm a big fan. It was actually on Esquire's Best New Restaurants list a couple years ago, the Charter Oak.
It sounds like they're the whole package. Like they're not only bringing you creative, interesting, delicious food, but it's just kind of like the whole experience that you're describing of the aromas, the visual beauty, and seeing the food being prepared, and just everything about it from walking into the door to sitting down to just experiencing this whole everything going on around you just sounds so lovely.
Yeah, man, that's exactly it. Because the thing is, when you're in California, you want to feel like you're in California. I think all the places that the experts and I recommended on this list embody that essence of Californianess. Like, if you go to La Superica or Pie and Burger or Ordinaire or El Maguey or June Jolie, in each place, it's not just good food. I think you'll be like, wait a second, this is what California is all about. And in terms of that holistic experience, I will add also in San Francisco, State Bird Provisions, which is recommended on our list. And I'll give the audience a little bit of a bonus. Mm-hmm. There's also a restaurant called The Progress that's not on the list, that's owned by the State Bird Provisions duo. And that's just a few steps away. At both State Bird Provisions and The Progress, there's really great cooking, but there's also a unique creative approach to how the cooking is served. At State Bird Provisions, these dim sum carts roam around the room. So you don't order in the traditional way. You don't like order just from a menu or something. You don't say, well, I'll start with this appetizer, then this entree. Mm-hmm, you just wait while these carts go around the room full.
That's fun.
Yeah, man. Isn't that fun? Like,
I
these
love
are
that.
Yeah, it's irresistible. Who doesn't? Like, we're all kids at heart, and this is like what kids love. Like these carts go around the room, and it's not Chinese food per se. It's not like Hong Kong dim sum. It's just based on that idea. So the carts go by, and you pick what you like. At the Progress next door, it's kind of their version of a tasting menu, and it's predicated a little bit. I don't know if Stuart, the chef, would say this, but it's kind of predicated on the idea that most of us hate tasting menus. Because we can't control them. So what they do there is they give you a sheet of paper with all the different dishes you could maybe get, and like you pick 6 that you like. So then they create a menu out of that. Like if you're like, well, I really don't like eggplant, I'm sorry, then you just don't check that one. And so you have this way to, you're kind of an agent in creating your own meal. I mean, that's always the case when you order from a menu. But in this case, you're really helping steer them toward the flavors you tend to like, the flavors you don't, whether you like a lot of spice, whether you like a lot of, creaminess. So both the Progress and State Bird Provisions, I think, reflect the peak of creativity in San Francisco right now. So that maybe you got to park the car and stay a couple days before you head back up to the wine country, but it'll be worth it.
Is there any broad advice you can offer road trippers looking for deliciousness?
Wow. I would say that the thing about California, it's a little bit like Italy. What they'll say when you're driving through Italy, you can take a random exit and find a place that's serving a great bowl of pasta or a perfect pizza. I think there's some truth to that in California, too. There's a lot of excellent experiences to be had outside of the big cities and off the beaten track, so to speak. I mean, one of the places we have is, it looks like it's called Duarte's, but it's actually pronounced Duarte's. That's just a California tip I'm giving you.
Okay.
In the same way that in New York, people say Houston Street, but we say Houston Street. So the Duarte's is like an old Portuguese tavern that's in the very, very tiny postcard stamp town of Pescadero. So if you're going up the Pacific Coast Highway between Morro Bay and Morro Rock in San Francisco, like sort of around Half Moon Bay, you might be tempted just like, well, we're getting close to San Francisco. Let's just keep going. I get that. But it's worth exiting for Pescadero. If I remember correctly, there's an actual like old cowboy graveyard near there from way back. And the restaurant's been there since like the late 1800s. It was started by a Portuguese family that was part of the fishing community there, I believe. And similar to Pie and Burger in Pasadena, they have excellent pies. They have a great artichoke soup. They have a lot of artichoke dishes and a lot of great sort of Portuguese-inflected fish dishes. So Californians, know about these places. Tourists often don't. I can't blame them. It's just, you wouldn't necessarily know about this. So venture far afield. Don't just stick to the main highways.
That's really great advice. And Jeff, thank you. This has been so great. Thank you for sharing all of these insider tips and all of these great restaurants that we must go visit. And thanks for coming on California Now again.
It's always fun. I love talking about California.
Jeff Gordinier is food and drinks editor at Esquire and author of the new book, Hungry, Eating, Road Tripping, and Risking It All with the Greatest Chef in the World. Follow him on Instagram at The Gordinier. As always, we'll have links to all the places we discussed on today's episode on our website, visitcalifornia.com/podcast. This is California Now. If you want to read Jeff's article about the best road tripping bites in California, you can. The 2020 California Visitor's Guide is available now for free. Just go to visitcalifornia.com/CVG to have a copy delivered straight to your mailbox. When you picture Los Angeles, one image that might not come to mind is a laid-back island with a distinctive small-town feel. But that's exactly the idyllic place my next guest is here to tell us about, Santa Catalina Island, often just called Catalina. Gail Fornasiere is the Director for Marketing and Public Relations at the Catalina Island Museum in the relaxed island town of Avalon, and we're excited to learn more about this storied getaway. Welcome to California Now, Gail.
Great. Thank you so much.
So to start us out, where exactly is Catalina? How big is it, and who lives there?
Catalina is about an hour boat ride off of the Southern California coast. Most people come out of Long Beach or San Pedro or Dana Point, which are all just south of Los Angeles. And the island itself is about 8 miles wide at its widest point and about 21 miles long. So not a huge space, but pretty awesome. And there's about 4,000 full-time residents that live on the island.
And who typically comes to visit Catalina? Do they come for like a long weekend, for a day trip? Who's coming to visit?
We have a great mix of day trippers from Southern California, of course. We also have a couple of cruise ships that are here every week from Carnival Cruise Lines, and then other cruise lines stop by throughout the year for other day trips. And then there are many people that come for a week at a time or a weekend at a time, and many often come year after year after year because they just fall in love with the place.
I imagine, yeah. So, and I've seen photos of Catalina Island, and it is just so gorgeous. And you are lucky enough to be working at the Catalina Island Museum, so you know the island inside and out better than most, I would imagine. Can you give us kind of a snapshot of its history?
Well, it is really fascinating. I think a lot of people don't realize all of its effects on the island's history is related to a lot of American history. And so the island, we know for sure, Native Islanders lived here at least 8,000 years ago. It's probably a little bit longer than that. It was part of Mexico for a time after the Spanish War there, and then the island went into various different private ownership, and all leading up to 100 years ago, William Wrigley Jr. of the chewing gum fame purchased the island in 1919, and that is what really started the island and the way you enjoy the island today. He really wanted to share this place with everyone that was around or nearby and worldwide.
Is it safe to say that a visit to your museum is the best way to learn the full story of Catalina?
Yes, we actually recommend and hope that people would visit us early on in their visit to the island so they can really get a sense of the place that they are and its impact in, the local Southern California community, but also in American history and beyond.
What would you say are some of your favorite exhibits?
Well, we always have a permanent display of Catalina history, of course, talking about all that great Hollywood history. And Chicago Cubs did spring training on the island for 30 years, from 1921 to 1951. Of course, under William Wrigley Jr.'s reign, he wanted to combine all of his interests. So if you're promoting the island, then why not bring the Cubs and have them here and then promote the island through all the Cubs fans and vice versa? So get all the people from Chicago to come out to the island. And I think a lot of people don't realize that history there. So we have a sports angle with that. We have an interesting history with World War II, where the island was taken over and used as a training spot for the Coast Guard and the Maritime Service, and even the OSS, which was the Office of Strategic Service, the precursor to the CIA, and the Navy SEALs, and they were doing secret training on the island during that time as well. So there's quite a variety. You go from Hollywood to sports to war history. We even played a part in the Civil War. So there's lots to learn on the island. And then about traveling to and from the island, we have seaplane history and some big steamships. So there's quite a variety, a bit of something for everyone.
Catalina has a long connection to old Hollywood glamour, right?
It really does. They started recording films and stuff on the island in the 1910s, basically. And from there through the 40s and into the early 50s, Hollywood used Avalon and Two Harbors and the most anywhere on the island for whatever they wanted. They turned the island into Tahiti, the American frontier, as many opportunities as they could to change it into something. We were basically Hollywood's backlot. So it was really called almost a movie colony for Hollywood there, and it brought us hundreds of films to be made here. Mutiny on the Bounty from 1935 is probably the most successful as far as Academy Awards and things like that, but over 500 films have been filmed on the island.
Yeah, and then also kind of as a result of that, I guess Hollywood stars would hang out there and go there to get away from like the hustle and bustle of everyday life.
Yeah, they really did. A lot of them actually owned yachts and sailboats, and they would come out to the island to get away, and islanders were very protective of the celebrities and their time here and wanted them to just be able to party and have fun and do what they wanted. So we had Clark Gable, Charlie Chaplin, Cecil B. DeMille, who actually made a couple films here and did a premiere at the famous Casino Building Theater. And Bing Crosby, Marilyn Monroe lived on the island for a bit before she was actually Marilyn during World War II. But she always fancied the island as well. And so numerous stars were here and would hang out and made films here and also just came to relax.
So what was Marilyn Monroe doing there, in the mid-40s before she became really famous?
So she actually, as a 16-year-old, married James Doherty, who was her neighbor at the time, and he was 18 and enlisted in the U.S. Maritime Service, and that was during World War II when the island was being used by the Maritime Service for training. So he got shipped over to the island to spend 6 to 9 months getting trained to be sent overseas, and his new young bride came with, and it was amazing. Married at 16, and we have some great images in the museum of her just enjoying herself at the beach and just sweet and innocent looking, of course, but of course she was surrounded by sailors and got a lot of attention. And we're pretty certain that that's where she found out her sex appeal and really kind of found herself. She was now in a free space that was, away from her troubled childhood. And so we think that she really kind of got her confidence and her Marilyn walk and all those things that you would see later. She kind of developed here. And when her husband was then shipped overseas, she had to go back to the mainland. And she started working in a factory for the war effort. And a photographer came in there and was, kind of documenting ladies working for the war effort. And that's actually how she got discovered to become a model. And then, of course, from there, she became Marilyn, and the rest is history.
So what do first-timers visiting Catalina do for fun? Like, what is like the thing that everybody comes to do when they first arrive?
Well, I think we've always been known as a party island and a party space. So, of course, there's plenty of drinks to be had, but really we are surrounded by the most idyllic and clear waters. And so there are many opportunities to go snorkeling and diving, and we have glass bottom boats and all kinds of different ways to see under the water and experience that amazing clear water, kelp forests, the beautiful orange Garibaldi fish, and everything else that you can see underwater. And I think that's one of the key first things that most people do.
What are some of the activities that people can do to really kind of experience that beautiful, clean, clear water off the island?
Well, of course, snorkeling and diving. There's jet ski rental. We also have dolphin and whale tours, and there's a cyclone boat that goes from Avalon to the other end of the island, which is like a more secluded kind of small resort version of Avalon, and really idyllic in that it has palapas and kind of a Polynesian feel. So there's many opportunities to also go fishing. You name it, we've got it.
And then what about those of us who like to go to the beach and maybe just hang out? What are some of the beaches that people can enjoy, whether they just want to spend a nice, relaxing day, on the sand?
Well, you can just go directly right after you get off the boat or right outside of your hotel room. Center of Avalon is all beach all around the harbor with beautiful white sand and a great opportunity just to walk right into the ocean and hang out there. Or you can go to Descanso Beach Club, which is just a 10-minute walk from the main downtown. And it's technically a private beach club, which means that they can sell you drinks on the beach, which is really a beautiful way to be grandfathered into something that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of other stuff to do on land as well, not associated necessarily with the beach. I've heard there's really great hiking on the island, and there's also bison to see.
Yes, the bison came over with Hollywood, of course. They provided those for us in 1924. They came over to be a part of a movie, and they brought 14, and either they ran off and they couldn't corral them, or they just thought it was too much work to take them back, but they left them here. And now we have a herd that continues to be between 100 and 200. It's managed by the Catalina Island Conservancy, and they also are the ones that manage 88% of the island, which is protected where the buffalo roam, and also where you can go hike from one end of the island to the other.
How do people get around on the island? Are there cars on the island? Is it just golf carts, or do people bike around?
The cars are really limited. There's a 20-year waiting list to have a full-size vehicle if you live here. So they try to keep that down. But the main mode of transportation besides walking is a golf cart, and that is a very popular activity as well for visitors. You would think it was like an amusement park ride. Everyone's so excited to take those golf carts around.
Okay, so let's say I'm looking to enjoy a nice meal or two in the town of Avalon. Where would you send me?
I would say there's a few great spots. Of course, many you want to go right by the water and there's a Blue Water Grill. There's also right on the pier that is our main pier in the center of the bay that has like a great fish and chips place. And then there's other great, more fine dining like a Steve's Steakhouse, or there's many Mexican food options as well. So you get quite a variety even for a little small space.
So Blue Water Grill, what are their specialties? What are they known for? What would you send me there to have?
I would send you to have any of their fresh fish. They actually have their own boat, and they go out and typically are harpooning swordfish in the local waters around the island. So it's usually fresh, and that's the best way to have it, just a little bit grilled up. So that's the perfect opportunity there. They also are situated right on the bay, so you can sit on the patio right next to the water and have the waves lap up while you're enjoying your evening.
Oh, that's really cool. Like, they don't even go to the market to buy their fish. They have their own boat and fishermen who go out and get the fish for them.
Yeah, it's pretty great. You can't get much fresher than that.
What's another great spot that you tell people who visit, you really have to go here and have a meal?
I would say in the summertime on the pier, the fish and chips that I mentioned, at the end of the pier, they have great fresh seafood as well, and they make the best fish and chips. So you can sit right on the pier, right out in the sun, and surrounded by everyone that's getting ready to go parasail or go on a boat ride and stuff. So there's a lot of action around there. I would say that for sure. And then my husband and I always end up at Steve's Steakhouse for a really nice dinner of a steak or fresh fish as well. And then there's also the lobster trap, which again with the fish, but when you're on an island, that is what you want. You want a lot of seafood, and a lot of people recognize that. So there are some good opportunities there. They have the best tuna poke at the lobster trap. So then there's the brew house on the island, right in the center of Avalon. They have the best coffee in town, but they also make their own beer. And so you can get your own Catalina brewed beer, and they have great names that reflect the island landscape, and they use like local Catalina sage for some of their brews and things like that. And then my other, I would say, is get on the Cyclone and go down to Two Harbors, where it's just one bar, one restaurant, and one little general store, and the palapas on the beach, and go have a painkiller cocktail down there and just sit back and chill out on the beach and maybe hike around and go for a swim. It's pretty relaxing.
Sounds really great. I mean, Catalina Island is a gorgeous place, and it's definitely on my list of California places that I must visit. So maybe I'll swing by the museum when I come by.
I hope you do.
I definitely will. Well, Gail, this has been so great. Thank you so much for joining us on California Now.
Thank you.
Gail Fornasiere is a staffer at the Catalina Island Museum, which you can find online at catalinamuseum.org and on Twitter and Instagram at Catalina Museum. As always, we'll have links to all the places we discussed on today's episode on our website, visitcalifornia.com/podcast. This is California Now. Thank you for listening to California Now. This podcast is produced by Visit California. I'm your host, Soterios Johnson. You can find our show on iTunes and Stitcher. Please subscribe, and you can learn more about California and plan your next visit at visitcalifornia.com/podcast.